Private Bradley Manning has been officially charged for little more than telling the truth. This, the fate of the remaining camps of the 99 percenters, and an overview of the week's actions will greet you in this episode of OWS Week. So we'll start with, to camp or not to camp, a look at the significance and symbolism of encampments and their prospects in the American Spring Manning Update, a report on the latest happenings at Bradley Manning's trial, an Occupy Weekend review, a glance over the movement in the past 7 days, and our weekly interviews with the cream of the 99ers crop.
Reverend Bruce Wright.
Private Bradley Manning was arraigned in Fort Meade, Maryland on February 23, 2012. He has been imprisoned since May 2010 and was subjected to solitary confinement for at least 10 months under conditions deemed torturous by several world experts, including the UN and Amnesty International. Private Manning faces 22 charges, including aiding the enemy. Manning declined to enter a plea and also deferred a choice of whether to be tried by a military jury or a judge alone. Military Judge Colonel Dennis Lynn did not set a trial date, but has scheduled another court session for March 15th to 16th. Private Manning is the best known of the many whistleblowers facing retaliation for revealing controversial U.S. government information. It is a fact that the current administration and Congress have gone after whistleblowers with a vengeance. Recently, a House subcommittee passed a bill which further weakens whistleblower protection. Add a climate in which the latest NDAA legalizes indefinite detention of American citizens and brutal authorities attack protesters exercising constitutionally guaranteed rights to peaceful assembly. It is no wonder that Occupy locations across the country have focused on Manning's case, with many, including military veterans, considering him a hero. These revelations have fueled democratic uprising around the world. The documents made public by WikiLeaks should never have been kept from public scrutiny. Citizens worldwide owe a great debt to the WikiLeaks whistleblower for shedding light on these issues. Americans across the country are sounding the alarm. I am Bradley Manning. If you can do it to him, you might do it to me.
Well, you know, I've voted for most of my life, but I've come to the conclusion that elections are rigged, no matter how you look at it, to benefit the people in power, to benefit the 1%, to benefit the moneyed interests. They control the elections ultimately, and I think the answer is no longer and never has been voting. Every movement that has resulted in change in this country has not happened because of electoral politics. It's been people's movements, whether it's civil rights, whether it's unionizing, whether it's ending war, whatever it is, those movements are movements that transcended a political party. So but especially now, I think since big money is so in control of elections, I know that I personally am moving towards abstaining from voting, because I think that if we collectively abstain from voting and say none of the above, that we want something new and different, I think we're going to get further.
What do you know about your city's preparation for the upcoming political convention? Do you think this is affecting civil liberties in general? The location here at Occupy Tampa, specifically, do you think it's going to have an impact on right here, Occupy Tampa? And how are you illuminating the situations plus counteractions?
Well, I think, as far as counteractions, of course, we've got the National Lawyers Guild and other groups involved that are trying to do something. We have numerous lawyers that are trying to take preemptive civil action. And, of course, Occupy Tampa continues to do civil disobedience and direct action, as does other groups in the Bay Area. In addition to all that, what we know about their preparations is this. They're putting multiple dozens of cameras everywhere, body scanners they're bringing to the area. They're mobilizing the National Guard. They're getting fire trucks ready for whatever purpose that is, I don't know. They're armored vehicles, helicopters, more than 4,000 cops, as many as 1,800 National Guard. They're creating effectively a police state here. And for us to counteract that, we have to first of all stand up and have courage. We have to look at alternative styles of actions, and we have to look at direct action and civil disobedience.
How do you see Occupy Tampa's General Assembly preparing for spring and the convention later in the summer?
Well, I think the General Assembly is so important now because really it is the de facto form of direct democracy. It is one of the most powerful things that's come out of the Occupy movement. And so I think Occupy Tampa will continue, as many of the people that are residents here will continue to organize collectively as a group speaking from the General Assembly as to what they're going to represent and their values.
What are your thoughts on Occupy's place in the electoral process? Should it remain outside? Should it try to become an insider? Should Occupy use multiple strategies depending on preference of those involved? Or should Occupy dictate to participants whether they vote or not?
Well, first of all, there should never be any dictating. It's up to the individual conscience. I would never tell people to do what I'm choosing to do. I would say that I believe that it's ineffective now to vote, and I would encourage people to look at other options. I don't think the answer is to become an insider and become an apparatus in the Democratic Party, for instance, like the Tea Party has with the Republicans. I think our best voice is to be on the outside as a prophetic voice speaking for the inside.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, just that I would encourage everyone to get involved in both the conventions and letting their voice be heard, as well as the GA in Chicago, and recognize that it's what's going to change this country is people's movements from the bottom up, grassroots democracy.
Protest camps did not begin with Occupy Wall Street. An early inspiration was Democracy Village, set up in 2010 outside the British Parliament in London. The Spanish Indignados set up camp in Madrid in mid-May 2011. By the end of that month, there were hundreds of camps across Spain and the world. The Zacuti Park camp was founded by Occupy Wall Street on September 17, 2011, and by October 9th, there were protest encampments in over 95 cities across 82 countries and in over 600 communities in the U.S. Occupy Oakland was one of the first camps to be forcibly evicted in October by a chaotic and violent police raid. Victoria Park in London, Ontario was the first forced eviction in Canada on November 9th. During the night of November 14th, a coordinated crackdown was undertaken by authorities around the world, with several camps violently cleared. Protesters regrouped in many areas and attempted to return to cleared sites, but authoritarian response was brutal and swift. Some Occupy sites have been able to stand their ground for a variety of reasons, but many surviving encampments have their hands full with caring for the homeless and society's cast-offs, spending more time ministering to medical needs, enforcing rules, and running food kitchens than organizing actions. Occupy is still very active in hundreds of cities, holding weekly general assemblies, working groups, coordinating with an inner Occupy, and planning upcoming actions. Some say the time for the camps has passed and just as much can be done without them. Yet the encampments served as giant billboards for the movement and inspired everyone, galvanizing community spirit and bringing progressive groups together in one place. There are 50 to 60 remaining encampments in the U.S. In the words of Occupy Rochester, the last camp in New York State, "The occupation is a symbol we don't want to lose. The encampments help to break down barriers and stop people from becoming complacent." The Occupy movement has asked remaining occupations to hold ground. Rochester may be evicted March 11th and is appealing for a show of solidarity from other groups. The remaining camps are important symbols of the movement. It may be a critical strategic error to allow them to fade away. It will appear, at the very least, that the ruling elite have vanquished the 99ers from the field. Appearance, as they say, is everything.
The ways that American capitalist society has, created different, aspects of different cultures, and it was very interesting to see. I loved it. It was very eye-opening. The encampment itself, it had maybe close to 150 to 200 tents in the camp, and a lot of people would share, and it was a very just vibrant, lively community. We had kitchen, library. We even had a tea tent. We had a labor tent. We had an information tent. We had our radical space, which was nice. It had like lots of radical literature. Medical tent. We had everything that we needed in that little camp, and it was just amazing to see, people kind of go back to that, prehistoric tribalism, in a way. Like, it was like we were there, for mutual aid and collective cooperation in order to keep the community going, which I think is something that, as a people, we have not really experienced in a long time, because we've been under the grasp of capitalist, bureaucratic dictatorship for the last X amount of years. So seeing that was definitely key. The occupation of public space in this movement was just a tactic. It was the first part of our phase, and I'm kind of seeing the movement as like, okay, yes, we're a nonviolent movement, but in a way we're replicating the same tactics as this country was supposed to do, when it went to war, like immediately occupied. Yes, we're here, we're not going anywhere, and this and that. But of course, we did go anywhere, because it's not like we're violent. We're not going to defend our space to the death or anything like that. So, and so that was the first phase, the first tactic of this movement, and this next phase is going to actually really it's going to be paramount in determining the future of where this country goes and this world goes, and I can't wait to see it. So the occupation of public space, people were always, people are still, after the eviction, we're still kind of hung up on the camp and things like that, and we can't sleep there, we can't live there, and so it was good to put ourselves in the public view. But now that we're done with this first phase, we're moving to the next part, which is liberation. And like I said, that was what, of course, our military was supposed to do, but they never did. We're liberating via education and building communities and having that mutual aid and cooperation and educating people on the system as a whole and how it has negatively affected, the individual's life.
OWS is gearing up for spring. Some people say the movement has been in hibernation, but a better description of the winter period would be percolation. From general assemblies to working groups to media outreach, OWS is a hive of activity. Occupy 90210 protesters showed up outside the Obama fundraiser dinner in Hollywood, California, where attendees paid over $35,000 per plate. Activists from various shelters pointed out that per plate price could feed over 17,000 people. Locations across the country continue disrupting auctions and helping homeowners facing foreclosures. Occupy LA's advocates are standing by a former Marine who fell victim to the economic crash caused by Wall Street greed and has reoccupied his home despite threat of eviction and arrest. Occupy Oakland marched with Occupy California to the Berkeley campus for a tour on the 19th and were met by the show of police force which appears to have become typical in the region. Occupy Oakland's nationwide protests against the U.S. police crackdowns and the prison system took place on February 20th at over a dozen sites across the country, including prisons in California, Chicago, Denver, and New York. Demonstrators denounced police brutality and the use of restrictive isolation units as infringements on fundamental human rights and called for major changes in the U.S. prison system, which today houses 1/4 of the planet's prisoners, more than 2.4 million people. OWS NYC held a town square event on Sunday the 26th that included an anti-fracking rally to highlight environmental, safety and health issues associated with the dangerous method of natural gas extraction and its immediate threat to the watershed. And the movement is planning major global actions, including food supply on February 27th.
It's food. Food for the masses. Food for us, food for anybody that wants to eat it. And we got to be prepared, and none of it's genetically modified like you get in the grocery stores.
Shut down the corporations on February 29th. And from March 3rd to March 6th, occupy APAC.
We move from the power we have to the power we need. I'm not into pissing in the wind for world peace anymore. You know, I want to see what are the milestones, what is the power we need to get to world peace, and then look at what's the power we actually have. Let's be honest about that, and then let's figure out what are the milestones to build the power. So if we want to break up the banks, I think that'd be a great milestone on the way to world peace. But how are we going to do that? Well, organizing strategies around how do you start a credit union successfully, or if you don't start one, like we did a project where we actually partnered with an existing employee-based credit union, and in our little 10,000 person community, we've moved over $15 million in less than a year out of the Wall Street banks, and about 1,100 people in a 10,000 person community are members of this credit union, and some of us community activists are now on the board of that credit union. People in Boston are doing amazing work, leading the way in eviction protection. City Life Vida Urbana, it's clvu.org. They've been leading the way on eviction protection, and they're actually working with the community financial institution that goes to the auction. And after the eviction blockade, or during it, this community financial institution buys the house at the auction, resells it to the person, functionally lowering the cost of their mortgage. Those folks reclaim the cities. Those folks are evolving that into a national demand for principal reduction for the 30% of underwater homes in the country. The $1 trillion in student loan debt, that's a perfect place for us to be organizing around, not just at college campuses, but amongst communities of people who are burdened, young people who are burdened with this debt for decades and can't afford to actually own a home. So I think when we find those little building blocks, those pieces that appeal to not just the people who are suffering from an underwater mortgage, but everybody who's in that depressed community, where that money is going to freaking Wall Street banks instead of going to local carpenters to do conservation, improvements and things to stop the flow, stop the leak of our equity and our wealth to Wall Street corporations and the phantom economy. I think we start building those blocks, putting those things together, growing alliances. Other thing we were talking about the other day was something that comes out of the Pentagon and is as old as the book The Art of War. It's an understanding of grand strategy. It's not a map to success. It's criteria for assessing the tactics and strategies that we deploy. So, first principle, expand alliances. Second part of that is to increase internal cohesion amongst those allies. And the third is to deepen the resolve and the commitment of the people that are participants. We have to know that the work we're doing is resonant with the deepest values that we hold and our purest aspirations. And then we have to stay true to those principles. Second principle of grand strategy is that we undermine the alliances of our opponent. We divide and we lessen their cohesion, and we threaten their resolve. We instill doubt in their cause. The last is that we want to fight battles in a way where we're winning without sowing the seeds for future conflict. So we have to identify real solutions. I'm critical of the so-called win in the Northwest Forest fight of the 90s around the spotted owl. Instead of finding a sustainable agriculture and forestry for all of our rural Washingtonians and a solution to the export of our jobs and lumber, we pinned it all on an owl. Now if environmentalists go out to rural Washingtonians, all they can talk about is the owl. Instead, we should have been talking about sustainable economy.